Hey, you know what time it is. Gotcha. Get into it. You know what time it is. Welcome back. Hi, lovelies. Welcome back to Storytime with Chris. As I always say, you don't have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your downtime, nap time, max, relax, and chillaxing time. In between time, mean time, scheme time, study time, break time, CP time, anytime that you want to hear a highly animated voice bring you wonderful stories of magic, fantasy, science fiction, adventure, and many, many more in between. Hi. A couple things. Excuse me. I am committed to Storytime with Chris. I have other obligations in my life that cause me to have to miss a couple of days, but that does not mean in any way, shape, or form that I've ever lost my love or passion for this journey that I've set myself out on, this passion project that has now been 4.5 years. It will be 5 years of Storytime with Chris next March 27th of next year. And so we're all human. We all have obligations. We all work or either have children or spouses or partners that take up a lot of our time, loved ones who may need us, sick and shut in, who may need us. And so these are not excuses, these are facts. And the fact is that this past week, well, the past 2 weeks, if I'm going to be honest, I've been a bit busy and I've been a bit drained. And so I've needed to take some time to pull back and get myself together and take some time to recharge so that I can be present. Because what I don't want to do is to do story time half-heartedly or to do so with a lack of fervor. I am a very vivacious, bubbly person, and I want that to come off as genuinely as possible, especially when I read. So, yeah, I just want to get that off my chest. And I've been doing a lot of leisurely reading. I've been reading a lot of novels that I've wanted to read for Storytime in the near future. And I've got some really cool surprises coming up. So I'm super excited about that. So, yes, the hair is up today. I'm living for it. Definitely giving Nikki Giovanni vibes. Shout out to the 90s. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. Return to another adventure with Pooh and all of our wonderful friends. Chapter 6, in which Owl becomes an author and then becomes one. It was a windy, breezy sort of morning, with a cloud scurrying across the sky as if there was a reward waiting for them at the horizon, and the tops of the trees bending excitedly this way and that. Things, it seemed, were on the move. Outside Owl's house, which was really Piglet's house because Owl's house had blown down and, well, you remember. Tigger and Roo were playing a new game, which each claimed to have invented. It was called Falling Leaves. You grabbed a handful of leaves and threw them into the air and had to make sure that you were not there when they came down again. If a leaf landed on you or even touched your arm, you had to do a forfeit. And any game with forfeits is sure to be exciting. Forfeit is to... Let me explain what that word means. It's just a fancy way of saying to bow out or to be taken out of a game. So the point of the game is that you got to make sure when you throw the leaves that they don't land on you or touch your hand in any way, because if you do, you have to step out of the game. And then I'm assuming it's a group of people. It could be 8 and then it drops to 7, then it drops to 6, or it drops to 4 and it drops to 3, and so on and so forth. So they just mean stepping out of a game or stepping out of a situation. Tigger was standing on his head and singing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star backwards as a forfeit for getting a leaf caught in his whiskers, when Owl came swooping down out of an upstairs window. He hooted angrily, pulled Tigger's tail so that he fell over, and boxed Roo's ears. "He did it really hard," complained Roo as Owl flew back to his house. "He wouldn't like it if I pulled his tail," said Tigger. "What's gotten into him? He's even grumpier than usual." "Don't know," said Roo. "Race it to the 6 pine trees." Owl was busy. If you were to knock on his door and wait for a while, you might be lucky, or more likely not. If Owl did come to the door and you were to ask him, "What are you up to these days?" he would look mysteriously and say, "Mind your own business," or "You wouldn't understand," or "Don't want any today, thank you very much." The animals and Christopher Robin discussed what Owl might be up to. Rabbit thought it must be something big. "Perhaps it's spring cleaning," suggested Kanga.
"You didn't think that the thesaurus has got him, do you?"
Piglet said anxiously. "Well, let's find out," said Christopher Robin. So they went to Owl's house, and Christopher Robin tugged the bell pull 8 times until it came away in his hand, and then banged on the door with the sole of his shoe. "Owl," he shouted through the door, "we're going to have a picnic. Do you want to come along?" "No," said a cross voice from within. "How about a row up the river to say hello to the swans?" "Don't like swans, noisy, vulgar things." Then when Christopher Robin shouted, "Open the door, Owl, I've got a present for you," which really wasn't true, but is a good way of getting people to open doors when they don't want to, Owl replied, "Not interested, busy." It was Piglet who uncovered the mystery. He scrambled around to the back of Owl's house and peered through a gap in the curtains, and there was Owl sucking the end of his quill pen.
"He looks as if he's writing a book," said Piglet, "but I didn't actually see him write anything."
"We must get him out of the house," said Rabbit. "It can't be healthy, cooped up like that. We could try smoking him out."
"We could starve him out,"
said Piglet, and then he added,
"just a little."
"Perhaps we could deliver a large wooden horse to him," said Christopher Robin, "and have somebody hiding inside." No, that wouldn't work." "I've got it. We will burrow under his house," said Rabbit, "and get in that way." So Rabbit, aided by friends and relations, burrowed under Owl's house and made an opening just big enough for Lottie to wriggle through. She waited until she heard Owl go into the pantry and then came up underneath the rug in his study. There was nothing particularly odd in the room, except a big pile of papers on Owl's desk. Lottie took the top sheet between her teeth and pulled it out through the burrow to show it to the others.
"It's got writing on it."
"It's got writing on it," said Rabbit, in case they hadn't noticed. Christopher Robin looked at the sheet of paper. This is what it said. "Uncle Robert, a legend in his lifetime by Owl."
"Oh, show it to me, show it to me,"
cried Piglet, who never liked to be left out of things, except sometimes buckets that were going down wells. "What Owl is writing," said Christopher Robin, "is the story of his Uncle Robert." "That's still no reason to pull my tail," said Tigger.
"Or box my ears, which isn't funny."
The very next day, Christopher Robin met Owl, who was cutting back to the branches that were growing over his window. "Hello, Owl," said Christopher Robin. "You're writing a book?" "Oh, so you know," said Owl. "It's a monogram." "I'm not sure what that is, Owl." "It's the story of my late Uncle Robert, who lived in Pretoria." "Was he always late?" asked Christopher Robin, "even for dinner?" "You'll have to read the book when it's published," said Owl loftily. "And now, if you'll excuse me," and he disappeared into his house. The following morning, Christopher Robin and Pooh were at Christopher Robin's house having their 11sies. Squashed fly biscuits for Christopher Robin and condensed milk for Pooh. They had just started to listen to music on the gramophone, and Pooh was wondering where the musicians were and how they were due to start. Excuse me. Pooh was wondering where the musicians were and how they knew to start playing when you put the needle on the record, when Rabbit came in noisily. "We're going to have to do something about Owl," he said. "Are we?" asked Christopher Robin. "Have a biscuit, Rabbit." "There's no time for biscuits. Owl is not the owl he was." "Biscuits don't take long," Pooh commented, "unless you get crumbs in your bed." I expect he'll get over it, said Christopher Robin, putting on a new record. No, 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 said Rabbit impatiently. Then suddenly he had an idea and knew that it was one of the finest ideas the forest had ever known. May I borrow your gramophone, Christopher Robin? He said. Of course, said Christopher Robin. Thank you, said Rabbit. Then he looked severely at Pooh. Everyone will assemble outside my house after luncheon, and I will explain my plan. That evening, Owl settled down to write Chapter 1, Where and When Uncle Robert Was Born, or born in this case. It was a chapter he had started to write a good many times, and he had just written Uncle Robert Was Born one more time when he had thought he deserved a break, so he got up to fetch himself a glass of fizzy lemonade and stretch his wings a bit. However, as he passed the living room window, he saw outside it a placard. There was writing on the placard, and the writing said, I don't want you to write my story. Signed, Uncle Robert. Oh, phooey, said Owl. Then he shouted, You out there, I know who you are, and I shall come out and box your ears. But he did not leave his house nor box any more ears, but went rather thoughtfully to fetch the lemonade. While he was out of the room, something slinky and slithery crept from underneath the rug, and a little later slinked and slithered back again just before Owl returned. Having flapped his wings a few times, Owl resumed his writing position, but there on top of page 1 was a large sign. It read, I mean it. Which, when somebody's trying to do a project and you got your friends trying to send you signs and regulations, that's kind of rude. Like, let people cook, as the kids would say. Let them cook. Now, is it going to turn out good? We don't know. It's Owl, and Owl tends to be a bit pompous, but that's what we love about him, is that he is incredibly smart, but just lacks a lot of common sense. Oh, really, said Owl, this is too much. He lifted up his quill and sucked on the end of it, but before he could write another word, a ghostly voice, unlike any voice that Owl had ever heard before, echoed from the chimney. Owl, it said, Nephew Owl, I do not want you to write this book. Who is that, and where are you? Owl asked nervously. It is your late Uncle Robert from beyond the grave. I don't believe you, said Owl, but his voice trembled a little as he said it. You better, said the voice, or you will regret it. And at that moment there was a loud rumble of thunder, or possibly it was a sheet of corrugated iron being shaken. If you really are my Uncle Robert, said Owl, he had to clear his throat several times before he spoke, prove it. Tell me what you did every night before you went to bed. At this, there was quite a lengthy pause before the voice said, in a rather hesitant and unconvincing way, I said my prayers. No, you didn't, said Owl. You drank whiskey. I drank whiskey, and then I said my prayers, said the voice. Owl considered this, but before he could think of a suitable answer, the voice added, now sounding quite like Rabbit, If you continue writing this book, you will wish you had not. Stuff and nonsense, said Owl very rudely, and sat back down at his desk. But just then, a loud blast of music resounded from the chimney. It was the national anthem. So Owl had to stand at attention until it was over, and the music played and the thunder rumbled, and outside the window, a paw held up a placard reading, Don't, and the voice from the chimney said, Be warned, and several small animals covered in sheets came from under the rug crying, Ooh, ooh, and pretending to be ghosts. Then Owl thought he had had quite enough and flew out of the upstairs window onto the branches of another tree. He sat there in the dark for quite a long time until finally the noises stopped. A twig snapped loudly. Bother, said someone. Go away if you are there, shouted Owl, and if you aren't, you can still go away. Once more there was silence, until Owl concluded that it was silly to be sitting in the tree and shouting at the darkness, so he flew back indoors. But the funny thing was that when at last Owl went to bed, he lay awake thinking. His head was buzzing with a jumble of placards and patriotic music and things and sheets and thunder and a suspicion that he might have behaved rather foolishly. Owl's just out here trying to write a story, can't get a moment's peace. It's just terrible. All he wants to do is write a story. He just wants to do that. And the more he thought he could stop writing his book just to be on the safe side, the more he thought he shouldn't stop writing because that would be giving in. Shan't, he said very loudly to the darkness, and then he fell asleep. Excuse me. Meanwhile, in another part of the wood, the others were saying good night to one another. Tigger returned the corrugated iron to the roof of Kanga's shed, and the friends and relations folded up their sheets and gave them back to Rabbit. Everyone was starting to wonder if they had done the right thing and whether Christopher Robin would quite like it when he heard. After all, did it matter whether Owl wrote a book or not? Piglet said,
I think it was a clever way of him to write as much as he did. But he shouldn't have boxed my ears,
Roo insisted.
or pulled my tail, agreed Tigger. I expect he knows that now, said Piglet.
I don't suppose he will do it again, said Pooh. Quite so, said Rabbit. Quite so. And indeed, Owl seemed to have got over his fright very well. For a few days afterward, if people came up to him and asked him how he was getting on with his book, he would say defiantly, very well, I've got to the bit when he talks about firewalking, or I'm working on his days in the animal hospital, or he's at the siege of Mefeking this week. I don't even know how to pronounce that word, but we're just going to go with it. But in time, people stopped asking. Roo and Tigger resumed their games of falling leaves outside Owl's house, and nobody boxed their ears or pulled their tails, which they were pleased about, even though it made the game less exciting. Then one day, Rabbit decided to visit Owl and to take some old letters that Uncle Robert had sent to Granddad Buck, because goodness knows Rabbit didn't need them cluttering up the place. I thought this might be useful for your writing, said Rabbit when a glaring Owl met him at the door. Going well, is it? Right? Me? Snapped Owl. You must be muddling me up with someone else. No, now I'm extremely busy, so if... He paused and blinked. How fascinating, he cried, snatching an envelope from Rabbit. Is that a 2-penny blue? An extremely rare stamp, continued Owl, bustling over to his desk, where a large album was surrounded by piles of old envelopes. Do take a seat, and if you promise to pay attention, I will show you my collection. Rabbit sighed and sat down, glancing longingly at the door. Owl began to tell Rabbit all about his stamp collection and all the different countries the stamps came from. He went on telling him about it for hours and hours until Rabbit had had enough and remembered an urgent appointment. And that was the first of many such days that summer, when Rabbit tried to stay awake and look interested while Owl went on about his stamps, until eventually Rabbit would suddenly remember something very important he had to do. But even Owl's enthusiasm for his stamps declined in time, and in later years, when the woodworm had gnawed halfway through the leg of Owl's bed, the stamp album served splendidly as a prop. And one cold night when Owl needed something to block a draft, the unfinished book came in very useful too. And that's where we'll end for today. Gotta get up, I gotta get going, I'm gonna see a friend of mine. He's chubby, he's cuddly, he's always so lovely, just Pooh Bear, Winnie the Pooh Bear. I remember the 90s Winnie the Pooh animated series, and it is still a vibe. Yes. I don't know, kids. No matter how old you get, never let go of your childhood spirit. It's okay to be mature and to grow up and to be sophisticated and to learn how to handle adult decisions and situations, but never forget what it was like to be a child, the wonder and magic and simplicity of just being a kid. Now, sometimes there are kids that don't get that luxury, and that is very unfortunate. But never forget about what made being a kid actually fun and engaging and wonderful. Even as a child, I always loved learning about new things, and I hold it to a high esteem. So, I will see you all next time, y'all. Be good. I'll see you then.